I used to think the best thing about running a small business was the people, not the numbers, not the clients, the people. We were more than just coworkers, or at least that's how it felt back then. There was this unspoken rhythm to our days, mornings filled with coffee, steam curling up from chipped mugs, the hum of old computers waking up, and the soft chatter drifting from the break room. I'd walk in, still juggling my own cup and a stack of files, and Sarah would already be there, smiling, talking about some new TV show she'd gotten hooked on, or offering to make a second pot because this one tastes like cardboard. She wasn't just another employee to me. She was, I don't know, kind of like a right hand, someone who just got it, the kind of person you could trust with your keys and not think twice about it. There were days she'd stay late with me, unprompted. We'd be side by side at our desks, the office quiet except for the tap of keyboards and the occasional clink of coffee spoons. I'd glance over at her sometimes and think, man, I'm lucky. You don't often find people willing to give more than what's in their job description. I remember one Friday night in particular. We were both still at our desks, long after everyone had gone home. The sun had set, and the city outside the windows was just a smear of moving headlights. Sarah stood up, stretched, and said, well, if we get audited one day, at least they'll see we're saints. Oh, I laughed, really laughed, and she grinned, that knowing grin. That night, I felt like we were building something solid together, something worth staying late for. Looking back now, I can see those moments for what they really were. The opening scene in a story I didn't know I was in. But at the time, it was just good, comfortable, predictable. The kind of predictability you don't realize you depend on until it's gone. It started small, so small in fact, I almost brushed it off. I was reviewing the monthly financials one Tuesday morning. Nothing unusual, just my routine check before heading into a meeting. But there it was, a payment that didn't quite line up. It's not missing, not glaring, just off. It's the kind of thing you could easily chalk up to a typo. I told myself exactly that. It's probably a simple error. After all, Sarah was the one who handled most of the transaction entries, and she'd been doing it for years without issue. But later that day, I found myself opening the file again. My meeting notes sat untouched on the desk while I scrolled through the records, scanning for, I don't even know what. Maybe a pattern. Maybe reassurance that I was overthinking. The office was loud with the usual midday hum, phones ringing, someone laughing down the hall. But my focus was stuck on those numbers, and the way a few of them didn't match up with the invoices I remembered approving. I sent Sarah a casual message on our work chat. Hey, just double-checking the vendor payments from last month. Like a couple are off? Might be nothing. She replied almost instantly. Yeah, I'll look into it. Probably a miscode, but don't worry about it. But there was something in the speed of her reply, and the exactness of her tone, that I couldn't quite put my finger on. Later that week, another little slip appeared. This time it was a petty cash record that didn't add up. I asked about it, and Sarah smiled, actually smiled, and said, you know how messy petty cash gets. It's like chasing loose change in a windstorm. I laughed with her, but inside something shifted. It was the tiniest hairline crack in the wall of trust I'd built around her. Flashback. I can still picture her. A few years back, balancing a stack of receipts in one hand and her lunch in the other, rolling her eyes at how chaotic bookkeeping could get. Back then, I thought that kind of multitasking was admirable. Now, in hindsight, it feels different. Like maybe the chaos was useful to her. That thought stayed with me longer than I wanted it to at first. I told myself I was just being thorough, responsible. You don't run a company without double-checking things. Hey, that's just good management. But the truth? I was looking for something. I didn't know exactly what, but I knew if I kept digging, I'd find it. It started with the last 3 months of financial reports, then 6, then a full year. I'd pull them up at night after everyone had gone home, the office bathed in that dull blue glow from the overhead lights. The building was so quiet, I could hear the faint buzz of the fridge in the break room. I started tracing transactions one by one, comparing payment dates to vendor invoices. checking timestamps on every entry. Most of it looked fine, but every so often, there'd be another oddity. A transfer that didn't match an invoice. A payment listed to a vendor I didn't remember hiring. I told myself there had to be a reasonable explanation. Sarah had been here longer than anyone. She'd been there when we landed our first big client, when we survived that awful year the market crashed. She'd put in the hours, the loyalty, hadn't she? One night around 11 p.m., I found myself pulling out old paper records, the ones we kept in dusty file boxes in storage. I sat cross-legged on the floor, flipping through faded receipts that smelled faintly of toner and cardboard. And there it was, a payment record from 18 months ago. Vendor name, Northline Consulting. Amount $2,500. I stared at it for a long time. Northline wasn't one of ours. I was sure of it. I searched our client database. Nothing. I searched my email. Nothing. The name meant nothing to me. But clearly it had meant something to Sarah when she'd entered it. Flashback. I remembered a day. Maybe 2 years back, when Sarah mentioned knowing a guy who could handle some quick back-end work. I'd nodded, distracted, trusting she knew what she was doing. It had been such a small thing at the time, not even worth noting. But now it felt like a missing puzzle piece sliding into place. I didn't confront her, not yet. I told myself I needed more, something undeniable, so I kept going. Night after night, weekend after weekend, until my eyes blurred from staring at the same spreadsheets over and over. Every new inconsistency I found felt like a drop of cold water down my spine. This wasn't carelessness. This wasn't sloppy bookkeeping. It was deliberate, and the more I saw it, the harder it became to look Sarah in the eye. During the day, it happened on a Sunday. I wasn't even supposed to be working. I'd promised myself I'd take the day off, maybe go for a walk, maybe actually cook something instead of eating takeout at my desk. But there I was, sitting in the office with the blinds half open, the winter light spilling across the papers like a slow confession. I was halfway through, cross-checking a bank statement against our vendor records when it hit me. Not a hunch, not a maybe. Cold, undeniable, there it is. One of the vendor accounts I'd been side-eyeing for weeks. Northline Consulting didn't just have a few payments. It had dozens. Small amounts at first, just enough to slip under my radar. $500 here, $1,200 there. But over time, the numbers climbed. $3,000, $4,500. When I totaled it up, my hands actually shook. $50,000, $50,000, gone. I sat there staring at the screen, my coffee going cold beside me, feeling like the room had tilted. My first instinct was to double-check everything. I ran the math again. Same total. I checked the bank logs. Same vendor. Same dates. I pulled up the account details. And that's when the final punch landed. The listed bank account for Northline Consulting didn't belong to a vendor. It belonged to Sarah. For a long moment, I just stared at her name on the screen. Thought about the times I'd handed her petty cash without a second thought. The late nights, the inside jokes, the way I'd once told a friend, if I ever get hit by a bus, Sarah could run this place without me. Flashback. I remembered the last company party, just 2 months earlier. She'd handed me a slice of cake, laughing at some joke one of the interns made. Hello. And I'd thought, this is someone I can trust with everything. And she had taken everything. I don't know how long I sat there before I moved. My stomach was tight, my mouth dry, and my pulse was so loud in my ears I could barely hear the faint ticking of the clock on the wall. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't borrowing. This was theft, and it had been happening right under my nose for over a year. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her name next to those bank records, the neat little columns of stolen amounts, each one like a pinprick in the skin of my trust. By morning, I knew I couldn't sit on it any longer. I called her into my office. My voice was steady when I asked, almost as steady, like my body hadn't caught up to my emotions yet. She stepped inside with that casual half-smile she always wore, the one that used to mean, "We're good, boss." Now, it just felt fake. Gestured for her to sit. She did, leaning back slightly, crossing her legs, like this was just another Tuesday. "I've been going through the accounts," I said. She nodded slowly. "Okay." "I found a vendor, Northline Consulting. Payments going back over a year, and the account it's linked to is yours." Her expression didn't crack right away. If anything, she looked bored. "Right. Well, I was handling some outsourced work." I cut her off. "Outsourced work doesn't go into your personal bank account, Sarah." That was the first time I saw her flinch. Just a tiny flicker, her eyes darting to the side, her hands clasping together a little tighter. She tried again, like I was going to pay it back. "Things have been rough for me lately." "I didn't think you'd notice," she stopped. Herself realizing that last part was a mistake, I leaned forward. "Didn't think I'd notice? You've been stealing from me? From this company? From the people who work here? For over a year." Her tone shifted, less apologetic, more defensive. "You have no idea what I've been dealing with. This place makes more than enough. It's not like what?" My voice was sharper now. "Not like it matters if you betray someone who trusted you with everything." For a moment, she just stared at me, her jaw tight, her eyes flashing with something I couldn't quite name. Shame, maybe, or anger that she'd been caught. I didn't let the silence stretch. "Pack your things. You're done here." Stood up slowly, her movements deliberate. "You're making a mistake," she said flatly, before walking out. I sat there, my hands pressed against my temples, feeling the adrenaline finally crash. Outside my office door, I could hear her moving around, drawers opening and closing, the shuffle of a box filling with personal items. No one else said a word. When she left, the door closed with the softest click, but it felt like a gunshot in my chest. The office felt different the moment she was gone. Quieter. Yes, but not in a peaceful way. More like the kind of quiet you get after a storm. When the air still smells like rain and something in you is bracing for more thunder. The team didn't ask me for details, but I could feel their eyes on me. The whispers in the break room. The awkward pauses when I walked in. Everyone knew something had happened, even if they didn't know the full story, and I wasn't ready to tell them. Not yet. I buried myself in work, telling myself that was the best way to move forward, but no matter how deep I got into emails and deadlines, I kept catching my gaze drifting toward her empty desk. The coffee mug she'd left behind sat in the corner like a ghost. I didn't touch it. Days passed, then a week, and then the letter came. It was a plain white envelope, sitting on top of the morning mail pile. My name printed neatly on the front. I opened it without thinking, scanning the first line, and then I had to sit down. Legal notice. Wrongful termination. I actually laughed. Out loud. That sharp, humorless kind of laugh you make when something is so absurd your brain refuses to take it seriously. I mean the nerve. But beneath the laugh, a knot of anxiety formed in my stomach, because I knew what this meant. This wasn't just her trying to save face. This was her doubling down. She was coming after me. I set the letter down on my desk and stared at it for a long time. The air felt heavier. It's the kind of heaviness that makes you want to lock every door in the building. Flashback. I remembered the day I hired her. She'd been so grateful, telling me this job would be a fresh start. I'd believed her. Now I wondered if that fresh start had just been the first chapter of a very long con. That night, the rain started. I stayed late again, the sound of water hitting the windows keeping me company. The letter sat in the center of my desk, unopened after the first read. Like a challenge I wasn't ready to answer yet, because here's the thing. Firing her was one thing, but fighting her? That was going to be something else entirely. If she wanted a fight, she was going to get one, but it wasn't going to be on her terms. The day after I got the letter, I cleared my schedule. No meetings, no calls. Just me, my desk, and every shred of paper and digital file that could prove what she'd done. I wasn't going to rely on memory or suspicion anymore. I needed facts. I started with the bank records, every transaction. From the past 2 years went into a growing spreadsheet. Dates, amounts, account numbers lined up like dominoes, each one waiting to fall. Then came the emails. I searched for keywords: Northline, consulting, invoice. I found threads where she'd sent herself vendor confirmations from an email address she'd clearly created to look legitimate. She hadn't even been careful about it. The arrogance made my teeth grind. Next were the timestamps. Every payment she processed matched a login under her account. No one else's. The system recorded everything, and now, so was I. Flashback. I remembered the early days when I'd told her, "You're the only one I trust to handle the books." She'd smiled like that meant something to her. Maybe. It did, just not in the way I thought. I dug out old physical invoices, cross-referencing them with digital copies. Some had subtle differences, amounts changed by just enough to pocket the rest. I scanned everything, labeling each file meticulously. By the end of the week, I had a binder so thick it barely closed. I didn't even bother with tabs. Wanted it to look intimidating, like a brick of evidence she'd never see coming. Still, the work took a toll. My eyes ached from staring at screens. My back hurt from leaning over boxes of dusty files. And my mind was tired in a way coffee couldn't fix. Every document I touched was another reminder of just how long she'd been playing me. But, tired or not, I kept going. Because this wasn't just about winning a legal battle. This was about making sure she couldn't spin her way out of what she'd done, not with charm, not with lies, and definitely not with some manufactured story about being wrongfully terminated. By the time I called my lawyer, I had everything in order. I told him, I can prove every cent. And for the first time since she'd left, I felt something close to control again. Courtrooms have a strange kind of quiet, not the warm library kind, the kind that hums with tension like everyone in the room is holding their breath. I sat at the plaintiff's table, my binder of evidence in front of me, its edges worn from the weeks of handling. Across the room, Sarah sat with her lawyer. She was dressed sharper than I'd ever seen her in the office. Hair pulled back, makeup flawless. She looked confident, like she thought this was all just an inconvenience she'd swat away. When the judge entered, we all stood. My heart was steady, not calm, but steady. This was it. Her lawyer started first, spinning a story about how she'd been treated unfairly, about misunderstandings and informal arrangements between us. I kept my eyes on the table, not because I couldn't look at her, but because I didn't need to. I'd let the evidence do the looking for me. When it was our turn, my lawyer began laying out the case. Transaction logs, bank statements, emails from that fake vendor account. Each document was displayed on the screen for the court to see, and, with every page, I saw Sarah's posture shift, a little less upright, a little more tense. One exhibit hit especially hard, a side-by-side comparison of altered invoices. The judge leaned forward, examining the differences in amounts, the matching timestamps from her account logins. There was no explaining it away. Flashback. I remembered her laughing in the break room, telling me once I'm not even good at lying. I'd believed her. Standing there now, watching her expression freeze, I realized she'd been excellent at it until today. The cross-examination was brutal. My lawyer asked her directly about the account number linked to Northline Consulting. She tried to skirt the question, but the judge pressed her. Finally, she admitted yes, it was hers. That was the moment it shifted. The confidence drained from her face. She wasn't in control anymore. By the end of the day, the judge ruled in my favor. The claim of wrongful termination was dismissed. She was ordered to repay what she'd taken. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just gathered my binder, stood, and walked out. Because this wasn't a victory parade. It was a funeral for the last bit of trust I'd ever had in her. When you walk out of a courtroom, you think you're going to feel lighter, like the verdict will dissolve the weight you've been carrying. But the truth? Winning doesn't feel like freedom. It feels like staring at the wreckage after a fire. The flames are gone, but everything's still charred. The first night after the ruling, I stayed late at the office. Not because I had to, but because I didn't really know what to do with myself. The binder that had been my armor for weeks sat in the corner of my desk, untouched. The chair across from me, her chair, sat empty, the cushions still faintly indented. The team congratulated me in that cautious way. People do when they're not sure if congratulations is the right word. Clients who had caught whispers of the case sent polite, vaguely supportive emails. Life, at least from the outside, was moving on. Inside, wasn't so sure. Flashback, I remembered the first Christmas bonus I'd ever given her. She'd hugged me, genuinely surprised, saying, "No one's ever done this for me before." I'd told her she deserved it. Now, I couldn't tell if she'd been grateful or just calculating. The office eventually settled into a new rhythm, but it was quieter. I caught myself second-guessing small things, a number on an invoice, a casual joke from an employee, even the way people lingered at their desks after hours. Trust didn't come as easily anymore. I replaced her position. Eventually, the new hire is competent, polite, and keeps a healthy professional distance. We don't share the kind of inside jokes Sarah and I used to. Maybe that's a good thing. One afternoon, weeks later, I opened a desk drawer I hadn't touched in months and found the coffee mug she'd left behind. It was chipped on the rim, the glaze worn from years of use. For a moment, I just stared at it, thinking about all the mornings it had been part of. I didn't throw it away. I just set it back in the drawer and closed it, because some reminders aren't meant to be on display, but they're too heavy to throw out. It's strange. It's the way life keeps moving. Court cases end. People leave. Offices get repainted. World doesn't pause just because you've been through something that shook the ground under your feet. Some days, I still think about Sarah. Not in an angry way anymore. More like when you think about a place you used to visit before you realized it wasn't as beautiful as you remembered. There's a dull ache there. It's not sharp anymore. What I've learned is this. Trust is valuable, but it's not infinite. You can rebuild systems. You can replace people. But you can't go back to the version of yourself who believed. Certain betrayals were impossible. I've added more safeguards to the business now. Double verifications, regular audits, checks and balances for everything. Not because I'm paranoid, but because I'm awake. Flashback, I think back to that. First Friday night, we stayed late together, the city lights smearing across the windows, laughing about audits like they were a punchline. If I could step into that moment now, I'd tell myself, pay attention. Not to the laughter, to the little things. The company is doing fine, better than fine, actually. I'm doing fine too, but the fine I have now isn't. The same as before. It's not built on blind faith. It's built on caution, boundaries, and the understanding that even the people you'd bet your life on can have a side you'll never see coming. Last week, I locked up the office late. The street was quiet, just the hum of distant traffic and the flicker of a street lamp overhead. I turned the key, felt the click of the deadbolt, and slipped the keys into my pocket. For the first time in months, I didn't think about Sarah. As I walked away, it felt like the right kind of ending. Not dramatic, not triumphant, just done.